The champagne was cheap, the art was pretentious, and my wife Emily was grinding against her ex-boyfriend like they were back in college. Just another Tuesday night in paradise. I'm Cal Scott, 34 years old, freelance IT consultant, and apparently the world's biggest sucker. I was nursing my third beer in the corner of this overpriced gallery, watching my wife of 6 years act like I didn't exist. The place reeked of desperation and expensive perfume, a combination that always made my stomach turn. "This is so exciting, isn't it, Cal?" Sierra, Emily's best friend, appeared beside me with that fake smile she'd perfected. Emily's been looking forward to this art show for weeks. Yeah, I bet she had. Especially since Brandon Keller would be here. Brandon, the guy who dumped Emily right before we met, the one she claimed to hate but somehow kept mentioning in casual conversation. The successful entrepreneur with the perfect smile and the expensive suits who made me feel like a discount store mannequin. I watched Emily laugh at something Brandon said, her hand resting on his arm just a little too long. She was wearing that black dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. "She looks happy," I said to Sierra, taking another swig of beer. "She does, doesn't she?" Sierra's voice had that edge to it, like she knew something I didn't, which, knowing Sierra, she probably did. The gallery was packed with the usual crowd of wannabe intellectuals and social media influencers, all pretending to understand the abstract paintings that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas. Emily fit right in with her Instagram-perfect life and her carefully curated personality. Me? I stuck out like a virus in a clean system. I decided to move closer, partly out of curiosity and partly because I was tired of being ignored at my own wife's social events. As I approached, I could hear their conversation. "You haven't changed a bit," Brandon was saying, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Still the most beautiful woman in any room." Emily giggled, actually giggled, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Stop it, you're terrible." "Terribly honest," he replied, moving closer to her. That's when I saw it. The look. The same look she used to give me when we first started dating. The look that said she wanted him, needed him, was ready to throw away everything we'd built for one night with Mr. Perfect. I stepped between them, my beer bottle gripped tight enough to crack. "Brandon, right? I'm Cal, Emily's husband." Brandon's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Of course, the famous Cal. Emily's told me so much about you." "Funny, she never mentioned you at all," I lied smoothly. Emily's face flushed red, whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. "Cal, don't be rude. Brandon and I were just catching up." "Catching up," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air like a bad smell. "Is that what we're calling it?" The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other people at the party were starting to notice, their conversations dropping to whispers as they sensed drama brewing. Emily loved attention, but not this kind. "Maybe we should go," Emily said quietly, but her eyes were still on Brandon. "No, stay," Brandon said, his hand touching her shoulder. "We were having such a nice conversation." That's when Emily leaned in toward Brandon, close enough that I could smell her perfume mixing with his cologne. Close enough that anyone watching would know exactly what was happening. "We need to talk," she whispered to him, completely ignoring my presence. I felt something snap inside me. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of putting up with her social climbing and her constant need for validation, 6 years of being treated like an accessory to her perfect life. And now this. "Actually," I said, loud enough for half the gallery to hear, "I think we all need to talk, right now." Emily's eyes went wide with panic. "Cal, please, not here." "No, here's perfect," I continued, my voice getting louder. "Why don't you tell everyone about your catching up session? I'm sure they'd love to hear about it." Brandon stepped forward, his friendly mask slipping. "Look, buddy, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Am I? I turned to face him fully. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to pick up my wife at a public event while I'm standing right here. The gallery had gone quiet now. Even the pretentious art couldn't compete with real-life drama. Emily grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. We're leaving, now! She practically dragged me toward the exit, her face burning with humiliation. Sierra followed, shooting apologetic looks at Brandon, who was already surrounded by curious onlookers asking questions. The ride home was silent except for the sound of Emily's angry breathing and the occasional sniffle that suggested tears were coming. I didn't care. I was too busy replaying the scene in my head, too busy realizing that my marriage had been over long before tonight. When we pulled into our driveway, Emily finally exploded. How could you embarrass me like that, in front of everyone? I turned off the engine and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd married was still there, but she was buried under layers of fake perfection and genuine selfishness. Embarrass you? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Emily, you were practically making out with your ex-boyfriend while your husband stood 10 feet away. If anyone should be embarrassed, it's me. We were just talking. Bullshit. I got out of the car and headed for the house. We both know what that was. She followed me inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown timer. You're being paranoid and jealous, and it's not attractive. You know what's not attractive? I turned to face her in our living room, surrounded by all the things we'd bought together, all the memories we'd made. Watching your wife flirt with another man like you don't exist. Emily's composure cracked a little. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Em? Explain it to me. Help me understand why my wife was whispering sweet nothings to her ex-boyfriend at a public event. She couldn't answer, or wouldn't. Instead, she did what she always did when confronted with uncomfortable truths. She turned it back on me. You've been distant lately, cold. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't need to seek validation elsewhere. The words hit like a physical blow. 6 years of marriage, and she was blaming me for her behavior. 6 years of working my ass off to give her the life she wanted, and I was the problem. You know what, Emily? You're right. I have been distant, but maybe that's because I've been married to a stranger for the past 2 years. I walked toward my office, the small room at the back of the house where I did my work and kept my sanity. It was the one space in the house that was entirely mine, the one place where Emily's Instagram-perfect aesthetic hadn't taken over. Where are you going? She called after me. To think, I said without turning around. You should try it sometime. I closed the door behind me and locked it, something I'd never done before in our marriage. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the beginning of the end. I sat down at my computer and stared at the blank screen, my mind racing with possibilities and consequences. Emily was cheating on me, or at least thinking about it. The signs had been there for months, the secretive phone calls, the new clothes, the sudden interest in going out without me. I'd been an idiot to ignore it, to hope it would go away on its own. But ignoring problems was easier than facing them, and I'd always been good at taking the easy way out. Not anymore. I opened my laptop and started typing, my fingers moving across the keyboard with purpose for the first time in months. If Emily wanted to play games, I'd play, but I'd play to win. The next morning, Emily was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to work early. We'll talk tonight. E. No love, no XOXO, just E. Even her notes were getting cold. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at our perfectly manicured backyard. Emily had insisted on hiring a landscaping service because presentation matters, Cal. Everything in our life was about presentation, about looking perfect from the outside while rotting from within. My phone buzzed with a text from my buddy Mick. Heard you caused a scene at the gallery last night. Sierra's been posting about it on Facebook. Of course she had. Sierra lived for drama, especially when it wasn't her own. I opened Facebook and found her post. Some people really need to learn how to behave in public. So embarrassing for everyone involved. Hashtag drama, hashtag marriage, hashtag yikes. Subtle as a brick through a window, that one. I spent the morning working on a client's network security system, but my heart wasn't in it. My mind kept wandering back to Emily and Brandon, to the way they'd looked at each other, to the familiarity in their body language. Around noon, I made a decision that would have horrified the old Cal, but felt perfectly reasonable to the new one. I was going to find out exactly what my wife was up to. Emily wasn't particularly tech-savvy, which made my job easier. She used the same password for everything, our wedding date followed by her initials. Romantic, right? She also had her email and social media accounts synced to our shared iPad, which she'd forgotten about months ago. It took me about 20 minutes to access everything. Her email, her Facebook messages, her Instagram DMs, even her text messages through the cloud backup. The digital breadcrumbs of her life were laid out before me like evidence at a crime scene. What I found made my stomach turn. The messages with Brandon went back 3 months. It started innocently enough. He'd reached out through Facebook, saying he was back in town and would love to catch up. Emily had responded enthusiastically, and they'd quickly moved the conversation to text messages. The progression was textbook emotional affair material. Reminiscing about the past, sharing frustrations about their current lives, gradually becoming more intimate and personal. By last week, they were exchanging photos, nothing explicit, but definitely not the kind of pictures you send to a friend. The worst part was reading Emily's complaints about me. According to her messages, I was boring, predictable, and emotionally unavailable. She told Brandon she felt trapped and unfulfilled. She said she missed feeling desired and appreciated. Each message was like a knife to the gut, but I kept reading. I needed to know the full extent of what I was dealing with. The most recent exchange was from yesterday afternoon, before the gallery event. Brandon: can't wait to see you tonight. It's been too long. Emily: I know. I've been thinking about you all day. Brandon: just thinking? That's disappointing. Emily: you know what I mean. This is complicated. Brandon: it doesn't have to be. We're both adults. We both know what we want. Emily: Cal will be there tonight. Brandon: so? We're just old friends catching up, right? Emily: right. Just friends. The conversation continued with planning how to act natural around me, how to find time alone to talk, how to avoid raising suspicions. They'd orchestrated the whole thing, turned me into an unwitting participant in their reunion fantasy. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. 6 years of marriage, and my wife was planning secret rendezvous with her ex-boyfriend. 6 years of building a life together, and she was ready to throw it away for some asshole in an expensive suit. My phone rang, snapping me out of my spiral. It was Mick. Hey man, you okay? Sierra's post made it sound like World War III broke out at that art thing. I'm fine, I said, though I was anything but. Just having some marital issues. Want to grab lunch? You sound like you could use a beer and some perspective. I looked at the computer screen, at the evidence of my wife's betrayal laid out in neat digital rows. Yeah, actually, that sounds perfect. We met at Murphy's, a dive bar near downtown that served decent burgers and didn't judge you for drinking before noon. Mick was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and scrolling through his phone. So, he said as I sat down, want to tell me what really happened last night? I gave him the abbreviated version. Emily flirting with her ex, me confronting them, the awkward scene that followed. I didn't mention the messages or my morning of digital espionage. That felt too raw, too personal to share even with my oldest friend. Damn, Mick said when I finished. That's rough, man. But maybe it's not as bad as it looks. Maybe they really were just catching up. I wanted to believe that. Part of me was still hoping this was all a misunderstanding, that I'd misread the situation and invaded my wife's privacy for nothing. Maybe, I said, but I didn't believe it. Have you talked to Emily about it? Really talked? I mean, not just fought? We're supposed to talk tonight. I took a long drink of my beer. Should be fun. Look, Cal, I've known you for 15 years. You're a good guy, maybe too good sometimes. If Emily's screwing around, that's on her, not you. Don't let her make you think otherwise. Mick's words hit harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on what I might have done wrong, how I might have driven Emily away, that I'd forgotten the simple truth. Cheating was a choice, and it was her choice to make. Thanks, man. I needed to hear that. Anytime. And if you need backup, if things get ugly, just call. I've got your back. I appreciated the offer, but I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Despite everything, I still loved Emily. I still wanted to find a way to save our marriage, to fix whatever had gone wrong between us. But as I drove home that afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. The messages I'd read weren't the words of a woman having doubts about her marriage. They were the words of a woman who'd already checked out, who was just looking for an excuse to leave. Emily's car was in the driveway when I got home. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, probably working on some social media campaign for her job. She looked up when I walked in, her expression carefully neutral. "Hi," she said. "Hi." The awkwardness was suffocating. We'd never been a couple that fought much, which meant we were both terrible at navigating conflict. We stood there for a moment, neither of us sure how to begin. "About last night," Emily finally said. "Yeah, about that." I sat down across from her, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "I think we need to have an honest conversation about what's going on." She closed her laptop and folded her hands on the table. "Okay, you go first." "I saw the way you were with Brandon last night, Em. The touching, the whispering, the way you looked at him. That wasn't just friendly conversation." Emily's jaw tightened. "So you're accusing me of what, exactly?" "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm telling you what I observed and asking you to explain it." "There's nothing to explain. Brandon and I dated in college. We're friends. We were catching up." "Friends don't look at each other the way you two were looking at each other. You're being paranoid." There it was again, the deflection, the refusal to take responsibility. I felt my patience starting to fray. "Am I? Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were more interested in your ex-boyfriend than your husband." Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't do this with you right now. You're being irrational and jealous, and I won't be interrogated in my own home." "Your home?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Last I checked, both our names were on the mortgage. You know what I mean?" "No, actually I don't." "Explain it to me, Emily. Explain how I'm the bad guy for being upset that my wife was flirting with another man in public." She turned away from me, staring out the window at our perfect backyard. "You wouldn't understand. Try me. You've been distant for months, Cal. Cold. Uninterested. When's the last time you told me I was beautiful? When's the last time you seemed excited to see me?" The accusations stung because they contained just enough truth to hurt. I had been distant lately, but it was because Emily had been distant first. It was hard to be warm and affectionate with someone who treated you like a roommate instead of a husband. "So, this is my fault?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the circular conversation. "You know what, Emily? If you're so unhappy, if I'm such a terrible husband, maybe we should talk about what comes next." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we should consider separation, counseling, something, because whatever this is, it's not working." Emily stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. For a second, I thought she might apologize. might admit that she'd made a mistake and want to work things out. Instead, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm staying at Sierra's tonight," she said, without looking back. "We can continue this conversation when you're ready to be reasonable." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in our perfect kitchen, with our perfect life falling apart around me. I poured myself a drink and sat back down at the table, staring at Emily's laptop. She'd left it behind in her hurry to escape, and I could see the edge of her phone charger sticking out of her purse, which meant she'd probably forgotten her phone too. The temptation was overwhelming. I could look through everything again, maybe find more evidence, maybe find proof of what I already suspected. But what would be the point? I already knew the truth, even if I wasn't ready to admit it. My wife was having an affair. Maybe not physical yet, but emotional affairs were just as damaging, just as much of a betrayal. And instead of owning up to it, she was gaslighting me, making me feel like I was crazy for noticing what was right in front of my face. I finished my drink and went to bed alone, staring at the ceiling and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start figuring out what to do about it. But first, I needed to know exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. Emily didn't come home the next day, or the day after that. She sent a few text messages, brief, cold communications about picking up clothes and needing space to think. I let her have it. I needed space too, space to plan my next move. I spent those 2 days doing research, not just on Emily's digital footprints, but on Brandon Keller himself. It turned out Mr. Perfect had some interesting skeletons in his closet. His successful business was actually a series of failed startups and get-rich-quick schemes. He'd been sued twice for breach of contract, had terrible reviews on business networking sites, and according to public records, he was 3 months behind on his rent. The expensive suits and flashy car were apparently all for show. More importantly, I found evidence that I wasn't his first target. Brandon had a pattern of reconnecting with ex-girlfriends, especially married ones. There were social media posts from angry husbands warning other men about his behavior. He was a professional homewrecker, and Emily was just his latest mark. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to take action. I called Mick and asked him to meet me at Murphy's again. When I told him what I'd discovered, his reaction was immediate and predictable. "What a piece of shit," he said, shaking his head. "And Emily fell for this guy?" "Apparently." I showed him some of the evidence on my phone. "Look at this review from his last business partner. The guy basically calls him a con artist." Mick studied the screen, his expression growing darker. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to expose him, show Emily who she's really dealing with. Maybe if she sees the truth about Brandon, she'll come to her senses." "And if she doesn't?" I'd been asking myself the same question for 2 days. Then at least I'll know I tried everything. Mick nodded slowly. "Okay, how can I help?" That evening, I put my plan into action. I created a comprehensive dossier on Brandon Keller, his business failures, his legal troubles, his pattern of targeting married women. I printed everything out and put it in a manila envelope, along with screenshots of his most recent social media posts bragging about his success. Then I drove to Sierra's apartment. Emily's car was in the parking lot, confirming she was still hiding out there. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering my courage. This conversation could go one of 2 ways. Either Emily would see reason and come home, or our marriage would officially be over. Sierra answered the door with a scowl. "She doesn't want to see you." "Too bad. We're married and we need to talk." "She's not ready." "I don't care if she's ready. Tell her she has 5 minutes to come down here, or I'm coming up." Sierra started to close the door, but Emily appeared behind her. She looked tired, older somehow, like the stress of the situation was finally catching up with her. "It's okay, Sierra. We can talk." Emily came outside and closed the door behind her. We stood on the apartment building's front steps, the evening air cool against our skin. "You look like hell," I said. "Thanks. You always know just what to say. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Even in the middle of our marriage falling apart, Emily could still make me laugh. I have something to show you, I said, pulling out the envelope. About Brandon. Emily's expression hardened. I don't want to hear it. You need to hear it. You need to know who you're throwing our marriage away for. I'm not throwing anything away. You're the one who brought up separation. Because my wife is having an emotional affair with her ex-boyfriend. The words came out louder than I intended, echoing off the apartment building walls. I am not having an affair. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd saved. Really? Then explain this. I showed her the text message thread between her and Brandon, the one where they planned their innocent meeting at the gallery. Emily's face went white as she read her own words. You went through my phone? You left it at home, along with your laptop, both synced to the cloud. You had no right. I had every right. I'm your husband, and you've been lying to me for months. Emily stared at the phone screen, her hands shaking slightly. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. You've been having an emotional affair, and you were planning to make it physical. That's not true. Then what is true, Emily? Help me understand. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've checked out of our marriage and into a fantasy with a guy who dumped you 8 years ago. She handed the phone back to me, tears starting to form in her eyes. You don't understand. Brandon and I have history. We have a connection. You have history with me too. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of building a life together. Doesn't that count for anything? Of course it does, but what? But it's not exciting anymore? But it's not new and shiny like your rekindled romance with Mr. Wonderful? I pulled the papers out of the envelope and thrust them at her. Speaking of Mr. Wonderful, here's some light reading about your soulmate. Emily took the papers reluctantly and started reading. I watched her face change as she processed the information, the business failures, the lawsuits, the pattern of targeting married women. This could be fake, she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. It's all public record. Court documents, business filings, social media posts. Your boyfriend is a fraud, Emily. A professional homewrecker who targets unhappy wives. He's not my boyfriend. Then what is he? She couldn't answer, or wouldn't. Instead, she kept reading, her face growing paler with each page. This doesn't change anything, she said finally, but I could tell it did. Doesn't it? You've been ready to throw away our marriage for a guy who's been lying to you about everything. His business, his success, probably his feelings too. You don't know that. I know he's done this before, multiple times. There are reviews online from other men warning about him. He finds unhappy wives, tells them what they want to hear, breaks up their marriages, then moves on to the next target. Emily folded the papers and handed them back to me. Even if that's true, it doesn't fix what's wrong with us. What's wrong with us is that you've been emotionally cheating on me for 3 months, instead of talking to me about whatever problems you think we have. I tried to talk to you. You weren't interested. Bullshit. You never tried to talk to me. You went straight from feeling neglected to finding comfort with another man. The conversation was going in circles, just like the one we'd had at home. Emily was determined to justify her behavior, and I was determined to make her see reason. Neither of us was willing to give ground. So what now? Emily asked. Where do we go from here? It was a good question, one I'd been wrestling with for days. Part of me still wanted to fight for our marriage, to find a way back to what we'd once had. But another part of me was tired of being married to someone who saw me as a backup plan. I don't know, I said honestly. I guess that depends on what you want. I want to be happy. And you can't be happy with me? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I don't know. That was the moment I knew our marriage was really over. Not because of Brandon, not because of the affair, but because Emily couldn't even pretend she wanted to work things out. Okay, I said quietly. I guess that's my answer. Cal, wait. But I was already walking back to my car. I'd said what I came to say, shown her what I came to show her. If she wanted to destroy her life for a con artist, that was her choice to make. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with text messages from Emily. I didn't read them. Whatever she had to say, it was too little, too late. Our perfect house felt emptier than ever when I walked through the door. I poured myself a drink and sat in my office, staring at the computer screen where I'd first discovered the truth about my wife's betrayal. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd call a lawyer. It was time to stop pretending this marriage could be saved. But first, I had one more call to make. I dialed Brandon's number, which I'd found in Emily's phone records. He answered on the second ring. Hello? Brandon, this is Cal Scott, Emily's husband. I think it's time we had a talk. There was a long pause. I don't think that's a good idea. I do. Murphy's Bar on 5th Street, tomorrow at 7. Don't make me come looking for you. I hung up before he could respond. It was time to have a conversation with the man who'd helped destroy my marriage. And this time, I wouldn't be the one walking away. Brandon was already at Murphy's when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth nursing what looked like an expensive whiskey. He'd dressed down for the occasion, jeans and a polo shirt instead of his usual designer suit, but he still looked like he was trying too hard. I ordered a beer and walked over to his table. He looked up as I approached, his expression carefully neutral. Cal, thanks for coming. Thanks for not running away. I sat down across from him, studying his face. Up close, away from the gallery lighting and Emily's adoring gaze, Brandon looked older, more tired. The con artist facade was harder to maintain in broad daylight. Look, he said, I know this is awkward, but I want you to know that Emily and I haven't done anything inappropriate. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Define inappropriate. We haven't slept together. Just emotionally cheating for 3 months, planning secret meetings, exchanging intimate messages and photos. Brandon's face flushed slightly. It's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple. You targeted my wife, fed her a bunch of lies about your success and your feelings, and convinced her to have an affair. She came to me willingly. I didn't force her to do anything. No, you just manipulated her into thinking she was unhappy with her marriage so you could swoop in and play the hero. Brandon took a sip of his whiskey, trying to look casual. Emily is unhappy. That's not my fault. Maybe not, but taking advantage of it is. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. I know about your little hobby, Brandon. The married women, the pattern of behavior, the other families you've helped destroy. His composure slipped for just a moment, but it was enough. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Jennifer Martinez in Phoenix, Sarah Chen in Denver, Lisa Thompson right here in town last year. Should I keep going? Brandon's hand tightened around his glass. Those women made their own choices. After you lied to them about who you were and what you wanted, just like you lied to Emily. I never lied to Emily. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd taken of his social media posts, the ones bragging about his business success, his expensive lifestyle, his bright future. Then I showed him the court documents and business filings that told a very different story. Successful entrepreneur, huh? Is that what you call 3 failed businesses and a pile of debt? Brandon stared at the phone screen, his jaw working silently. When he looked up, the friendly mask had slipped completely. What do you want? I want you to leave my wife alone. It's too late for that. Emily's already made her choice. Has she? Because when I showed her who you really are, she seemed pretty shocked. Something flickered in Brandon's eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. You showed her what? Everything. Your business failures, your legal troubles, your history of targeting married women. Amazing how different you look when the facts come to light. Brandon finished his whiskey in one gulp and signaled the bartender for another. Even if she believes you, it doesn't matter. She's not happy with you, Cal. She told me so herself. Yeah, I've heard your greatest hits, but here's the thing. Marriage isn't about being happy every single day. It's about working through problems together, not running away the first time things get difficult. Is that what you think this is? Running away? I think this is a middle-aged con artist preying on vulnerable women because he can't build a real relationship with someone who knows who he really is. Brandon's face darkened. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you're broke, desperate, and probably looking for your next meal ticket. I know you've done this before, and you'll do it again after Emily figures out what you really are. Emily loves me. Emily loves the idea of you, the fantasy you sold her. But fantasies don't pay rent, do they, Brandon? How long before she figures out that your success story is just another lie? Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This conversation is over. No, it's not. I stood up too, matching his aggressive posture. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stop calling her, stop texting her, stop filling her head with bullshit about your great love story. Or what? Or I'll make sure everyone in town knows exactly who Brandon Keller really is. Your potential clients, your landlord, your friends, everyone gets to see the court documents and the angry reviews and the pattern of destroyed marriages. Brandon's face went pale. You can't do that. Watch me. It's all public record, remember? I'm just making it more accessible. We stared at each other across the table, the tension thick enough to cut. Other patrons were starting to notice, conversations dropping to whispers as they sensed trouble brewing. You're making a mistake, Brandon said quietly. Emily doesn't love you anymore. Even if I disappear tomorrow, that won't change. The words hit like a physical blow, partly because I was afraid they might be true. But I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Maybe not. But at least she'll have a chance to figure that out without you whispering poison in her ear. Brandon threw a 20 on the table and headed for the door. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I watched him leave, his shoulders tense with anger and frustration. Part of me felt satisfied. I'd confronted the man who'd helped destroy my marriage and made it clear that his games wouldn't be tolerated. But another part of me felt empty. Brandon was right about one thing. Even if he disappeared completely, it wouldn't fix what was broken between Emily and me. I finished my beer and drove home, unsure what I'd find. Emily's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was still at Sierra's, still hiding from the consequences of her choices. My phone buzzed with a text message as I walked into the house. It was from Emily. We need to talk. Can I come home? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. It's your home, too. 20 minutes later, Emily's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the living room window as she sat in the car for several minutes, gathering her courage. When she finally came inside, she looked like she'd been crying. Hi, she said softly. Hi. We stood there awkwardly, two people who'd shared a bed for 6 years, suddenly unsure how to be in the same room together. Brandon called me, Emily said finally. He told me about your conversation. I bet he did. What did he say? That you threatened him. That you're trying to control me. I almost laughed. Even caught red-handed, Brandon was still trying to manipulate the situation. Is that what you think? That I'm trying to control you? Emily sat down on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. I don't know what to think anymore. Think about this. Your boyfriend called you immediately after our conversation to tell you his version of what happened. Does that sound like someone who's being honest with you? He's not my boyfriend. Then what is he, Emily? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having a relationship with him for months. She started crying then, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. I'm so confused. I don't know what's real anymore. I wanted to comfort her, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. but I couldn't. She'd made choices that had brought us to this point, and comfort felt like enabling her behavior. "What did Brandon tell you about our conversation?" I asked. "He said you were jealous and angry, that you made up lies about his business to try to break us up." "And what do you think?" Emily looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I think you're a lot of things, Cal, but you're not a liar." It was the first honest thing she'd said to me in months. I sat down beside her on the couch, careful to maintain some distance. "I'm not trying to control you, Em. I'm trying to save our marriage. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because it feels like you're trying to make my decisions for me. I'm trying to give you accurate information so you can make informed decisions. Brandon lied to you about who he is and what he wants. You deserve to know the truth." Emily wiped her eyes and looked at me. "Even if everything you showed me is true, it doesn't change the fact that we have problems." "You're right. We do have problems. But running away with another man isn't going to solve them." "I wasn't running away." "Then what were you doing? Because those text messages sure looked like you were planning to leave me for him." Emily couldn't answer, which was answer enough. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us lost in our own thoughts. "I don't know how to fix this," she said finally. "I don't either, but I know we can't fix it if you're still talking to Brandon. He says he loves me. He says a lot of things. Most of them are lies." Emily stood up and walked to the window, staring out at our perfect backyard. I felt alive when I was with him, excited, like I mattered. "You matter to me." "Do I? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like I'm just part of your routine, like you'd barely notice if I disappeared." The accusation stung because it contained just enough truth to hurt. I had gotten comfortable in our marriage, had stopped making an effort to romance my wife, but that didn't justify what she'd done. Marriage isn't a romance novel, Emily. It's not constant excitement and passion. It's partnership and commitment and working through problems together. I know that. But it shouldn't be boring either. So you decided to find excitement with someone else, instead of talking to me about it. Emily turned away from the window to face me. "Would you have listened? Really listened? Not just waited for your turn to talk?" It was a fair question, one that made me uncomfortable because I wasn't sure of the answer. Had I been emotionally unavailable? Had I ignored signs that Emily was unhappy? "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I wish you'd given me the chance to find out. I wish I had too." For a moment I thought we might be making progress, but then Emily's phone buzzed with a text message, and I saw her face change as she read it. "Brandon?" I asked. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "What does he want?" "He wants to see me, to explain his side of things." "And?" Emily looked at me, her expression torn between guilt and defiance. "I think I owe him that much." The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have, a small mechanical sound that somehow carried the weight of 15 years, the weight of every compromise I'd swallowed to keep things smooth, the weight of every time I'd told myself Emily didn't mean it, that she was just confused, that love meant patience. I stood in the entryway for a moment, staring at the door, like I expected it to reopen, like I expected her to turn around and choose us at the last second, and when it didn't happen, something in me went still. Not rage, not panic. Stillness. The kind of stillness you feel when you finally stop arguing with reality. That's when I knew our marriage was really over. Not because of the affair, not because of the lies, but because Emily was still choosing Brandon over us. Even now, even with me standing there asking for the bare minimum, loyalty, priority, a clean boundary, she walked out like I was just another obstacle to manage. I could have forgiven the betrayal itself if she'd chosen us afterward, if she'd looked me in the eye and said, "I was wrong, and I'm done." But she didn't do that. She chose him again, and that second choice was the one I couldn't unsee. I went back into the living room and stood in the center of it, letting the silence settle. Our perfect house, carefully curated, tasteful furniture, neutral colors, the kind of place people complimented because it looked like stability. The framed photos on the mantel suddenly felt like props. The wedding picture, her smile bright and effortless, my arm around her waist like I believed I'd won something permanent. The vacation photo from Lake Tahoe, her leaning into me, laughing, a moment so real I could still feel the cold air in my lungs when I looked at it. All of it sat there unchanged, while the foundation underneath it cracked. I poured myself a drink, because it felt like something a man in my position was supposed to do. And then I carried it to my office, because the office was the only room that belonged to me without negotiation. I shut the door behind me and sat down at my desk, the same desk I'd used to plan budgets, vacations, life decisions, the same desk where Emily had once perched on the corner with a mug of tea and told me I worked too much, smiling like she was proud of me and worried about me at the same time. I stared at the computer screen, black and blank, my reflection faintly visible in it, and the person staring back didn't look like a man who was shocked anymore. He looked like a man who'd been warned repeatedly and finally stopped covering his ears. My phone sat on the desk beside the glass. I didn't pick it up. I didn't scroll through old messages. I didn't call her. I let myself sit there and feel the full truth of what had happened, because avoiding it was what had brought me here. I had spent months living in the comfortable lie that Emily's confusion would pass, that Brandon was a phase, that the affair was a mistake she would regret when the fantasy wore off. I'd treated my own marriage like it was made of rubber, like it could stretch endlessly and return to shape. But marriage isn't rubber. It's trust, and trust doesn't snap all at once. It frays slowly, strand by strand, until one day you pull and it doesn't hold. I took a sip and felt the burn in my throat, warm and sharp, and I let my mind replay the moment at the door, the hand on the knob, the pause, the line she'd used as if she'd rehearsed it. "I'm sorry, Cal. I really am." That sentence wasn't an apology. It was a farewell dressed in softness. It was a way to leave while pretending she wasn't choosing cruelty. She wanted to walk out and still be seen as kind. I set the glass down and opened a drawer, pulling out a folder I'd started weeks ago and kept telling myself I wouldn't need. Inside were printed screenshots, small notes, dates, the kind of quiet documentation you start when your instincts are screaming and your heart is trying to talk them down. At the top was Brandon Keller's name, written in my own handwriting, darker than it needed to be. Brandon Keller. Even the name sounded engineered, like it belonged on a business card, like it belonged to a man who knew how to smile in ways that made people trust him. Emily had said he was charming, persuasive, misunderstood. She'd said he'd had a hard life. She'd said people were unfair to him, that he was being targeted by jealous coworkers, by bitter exes, by people who didn't appreciate his talent. Every con artist comes with a chorus of invisible enemies. It makes the mark feel special for believing in them. I didn't know Brandon's full story yet, but I knew the shape of it. I'd seen how he moved through Emily's life like he belonged there, how quickly he'd positioned himself as her confidant, how he'd subtly made her see me as the obstacle, not the partner. He didn't just steal affection. He stole alignment. He made her speak his language. He made her defend him reflexively, even when it cost her marriage. That was the most dangerous kind of betrayal. Not the physical one, the mental one. I opened my laptop and began to type. Not an email to a lawyer, not yet, but a list. Because the first step of reclaiming control wasn't emotion, it was clarity. I wrote his name at the top, and beneath it, I started building the outline of who he really was, not the version Emily wanted him to be. Employment history, past addresses, business registrations, lawsuits, social media accounts, names of associates, patterns, overlaps, gaps, the places where someone's story didn't match the public record. I wasn't looking for dirt to fling. I was looking for truth to anchor. Because if Emily was going to throw her life away for him, she was going to do it with her eyes wide open. I paused, hands hovering over the keyboard, and I thought about what show the world actually meant. It meant escalation. It meant pushing this out of the private sphere and into the light, where other people could see it and react to it and possibly use it for their own entertainment. It meant risking backlash, risking being painted as jealous, controlling, vindictive. Brandon would spin it that way. Emily might spin it that way too. People always prefer a simple villain. But I wasn't doing this because my ego needed to win. I was doing it because Brandon wasn't just a man Emily was cheating with. He was a threat, and I could feel it in the way he'd infiltrated our life. He had the confidence of someone who'd done this before. He had the ease of someone who didn't fear consequences because he'd already built an escape route. I stood up and paced the office, the drink in my stomach warming me, not enough to numb, just enough to sharpen the edges. I stopped at the bookshelf and ran my fingers over the spines, old business books Emily had bought me, because she said she admired my discipline. The irony hit hard, but it also hardened something in me. I didn't want to be admired anymore. I wanted to be respected, and if respect wasn't possible, I wanted to be free. I returned to the desk and opened a browser window. The cursor blinked in the search bar like a heartbeat. I typed his name. Then I typed the city. Then the industry Emily said he worked in. Results began to populate, and within seconds, I saw the first hint of what I expected. A glossy profile that didn't quite match the timeline she'd described. A photo that looked a little too curated. A company page with impressive language and very little substance. A polished surface. I clicked, then another, and I began collecting. Screenshots, archived pages, public record searches, anything that could be verified, anything that could be shown to someone else without sounding like paranoia. I wasn't trying to prove he was evil. I was trying to prove he was inconsistent. Inconsistency is where truth hides. Outside my office door, the house remained quiet, the kind of quiet that used to mean comfort. Now, it meant abandonment. Emily was out there somewhere, choosing him again, and the old part of me wanted to call her, to beg, to convince, to plead for our life back. But the new part of me, the part she and Brandon had created through their choices, simply kept working, because the marriage was over. And if Brandon Keller was going to take what was left of my life, he was going to have to do it under a spotlight. I spent the next 3 hours creating what I privately called the Brandon Keller Experience, a comprehensive website documenting his business failures, legal troubles, and pattern of targeting married women. I used only public records and verifiable information, but presented it in a way that painted a clear picture of who he really was. The site included court documents from his lawsuits, screenshots of negative reviews from former business partners, and testimonials from other men whose marriages he'd helped destroy. I even found his real financial status through public bankruptcy filings. Turns out, Mr. Successful Entrepreneur was flat broke. I registered the domain under brandonkellertruth.com and made sure it would show up first in any Google search of his name. Then I created social media accounts and started sharing the information with local business networks, dating sites, and community groups. By midnight, the site was live and spreading across the internet like wildfire. Brandon's carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time. Emily came home around 1 a.m., her face streaked with tears and her makeup ruined. She found me in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the website analytics climb. "You bastard," she said, throwing her phone on the counter. "You destroyed him." "I exposed him. There's a difference." His landlord called him tonight. He's being evicted. His business contacts are dropping him. You've ruined his life. I published public records and verifiable facts. If that ruined his life, maybe his life was built on lies. Emily collapsed into a chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs. How could you be so cruel? Cruel. I looked at her. This woman I'd loved and married and built a life with, and felt nothing but contempt. I'm not the one who spent 3 months lying to my spouse and planning to leave them for a con artist. He's not a con artist. Did you ask him about the bankruptcy, the failed businesses, the other married women? Emily's silence told me everything I needed to know. Let me guess, I continued. He had explanations for everything. The bankruptcy was his partner's fault. The business failures were due to the economy. The other women were lying. Stop it. Did he tell you he loved you? That you were different from all the others? That you two had something special? Stop it! That's his playbook, Emily. That's what he does. He finds unhappy wives, tells them exactly what they want to hear, then moves on when the fantasy becomes reality. Emily looked up at me, her face red and swollen from crying. Even if that's true, it doesn't excuse what you did tonight. What I did tonight was protect other women from making the same mistake you did. You did it for revenge. Maybe. But that doesn't make it wrong. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, 6 years of marriage reduced to this moment of mutual destruction. I felt empty, hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only the shell. So what now? Emily asked quietly. Now you decide what you want to do with your life, but you do it without me. Cal, please. Can't we try to work this out? Work what out? You chose him over me, Emily. You chose a fantasy over our marriage. There's nothing left to work out. I made a mistake. You made a series of choices over 3 months. This wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. Emily started crying again, but I felt no urge to comfort her. She'd burned that bridge when she walked out the door to see Brandon despite my objections. I'll file for divorce tomorrow, I said. You can stay here tonight, but I want you gone by the weekend. This is my house too. Then buy me out, or sell it. I don't care. I just don't want to live here with you anymore. Emily looked around our perfect kitchen, at all the things we'd bought together, all the memories we'd made. It doesn't have to end like this. Yes, it does. You made sure of that when you chose him over us. She went upstairs to pack, and I stayed in the kitchen, watching the website analytics and thinking about the future. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. The uncertainty was over. The pretending was done. Emily had shown me who she really was, and I'd shown her the consequences of her choices. My phone buzzed with a text from Mick. Saw your website. Holy shit, man. Remind me never to piss you off. I smiled despite everything. At least someone appreciated my work. The next morning, Emily was gone before I woke up. She'd left another note. I'll be at Sierra's. My lawyer will contact yours. So she was really going through with it. Part of me had hoped she'd come to her senses, that she'd realize what she was throwing away and try to fight for our marriage. But Emily had never been a fighter. She was a runner, always looking for the easy way out. I called a divorce attorney and made an appointment for that afternoon. Then I called my office and told them I'd be working from home for the rest of the week. I needed time to process what had happened, to figure out what came next. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Brandon standing on my porch, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. You son of a bitch, he said, pushing past me into the house. Make yourself at home, I said, closing the door behind him. You destroyed my life. I published the truth. If that destroyed your life, maybe you should have made better choices. Brandon spun around to face me, his hands clenched into fists. I could sue you for libel. With what money? Besides, truth is an absolute defense against libel. Everything on that site is verifiable public record. You had no right. I had every right. You helped destroy my marriage. I just returned the favor. Brandon looked around our living room, taking in the expensive furniture and carefully chosen decorations. You think you won? Emily still left you. She's still choosing me over you. Is she? Because from what I heard, she spent most of last night crying about how you lied to her. Something flickered in Brandon's eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. She'll come around. Once she calms down and realizes what you've done, she'll see that you're the real villain here. Maybe. Or maybe she'll realize that she threw away a good marriage for a fantasy. Your marriage wasn't good. Emily told me how miserable she was, how neglected she felt. And you were happy to take advantage of that instead of encouraging her to work on her problems. I gave her what she needed. You gave her what she wanted. There's a difference. Brandon walked to the window and stared out at the street, his shoulders tense with frustration. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Your reputation is destroyed, your business is gone, and Emily knows who you really are. It's over. I'll rebuild. I always do. Not here you won't. Not in this town. Everyone knows your story now. Brandon turned back to me, his expression desperate. What do you want? Money? I can pay you back for whatever this cost you. With what money? You're broke, remember? I can get money. From your next mark? Sorry, but that well is dry. No one's going to trust you after this. Brandon's composure finally cracked completely. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so much better than me, but you're not. You're just a boring, mediocre man who couldn't keep his wife happy. Maybe, but at least I'm not a predator who destroys families for sport. I didn't destroy anything. Your marriage was already dead. I just helped Emily realize it. Keep telling yourself that. Brandon headed for the door, his face red with anger and humiliation. Emily will realize what you've done. She'll see that you're the real monster here. We'll see. After he left, I sat in my living room and thought about what he'd said. Was I a monster? Had I gone too far in exposing him? Part of me felt guilty about destroying his life so completely, but a larger part felt satisfied. Brandon had made a living destroying marriages and hurting families. It was poetic justice that his own life was now in ruins. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Emily. We need to talk, she said without preamble. I thought we said everything last night. Not about us. About what you did to Brandon. What about it? He's talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere else. Good. Maybe he'll find an honest way to make a living. Cal, please, can't you take the website down? He's learned his lesson. Have you learned yours? There was a long pause. What do you mean? I mean, are you still planning to leave me for him? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know. Then the website stays up. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I had to find out about your affair by hacking your phone? Is it fair that you chose him over our marriage without even trying to work things out? I know I made mistakes. You made choices, Emily, and choices have consequences. So this is my punishment? This is reality. You chose to have an affair with a con artist, and now you're dealing with the fallout. Welcome to the real world. Emily was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was small and defeated. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and now we all have to live with the consequences. I love you, Cal. I know I screwed up, but I still love you. The words should have made me feel something, hope, forgiveness, maybe even love in return. Instead, I felt nothing. It's too late for that, Emily. You killed whatever love we had when you chose him over us. It doesn't have to be too late. Yes, it does. I'll never be able to trust you again. Every time you're late coming home, every time you get a text message, every time you talk to another man, I'll wonder if you're cheating again. That's no way to live. Emily started crying again, but I didn't feel moved to comfort her. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of our empty house. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding my life. I'd figure out what came next, how to move forward without the woman I'd thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But today, I just sat in the wreckage of our marriage and felt something like peace. The uncertainty was over, the lies were exposed, and the truth was finally out in the open. It wasn't the ending I'd hoped for, but it was the ending we deserved. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Mick. Saw Emily at the grocery store. She looks terrible. Asked about you. I didn't respond. Emily was part of my past now, a chapter I'd closed and filed away. Brandon had left town, just as he'd threatened, probably looking for a new place to start his con games. And I was learning to live alone again, rediscovering who I was without someone else's drama consuming my life. The divorce papers came a month later. Emily had agreed to all my terms. She got half the house value but had to buy me out, and I kept my business and retirement accounts. It was fair, which was more than she deserved, but exactly what I'd expected. I signed the papers and mailed them back the same day. 6 years of marriage, reduced to legal documents and property division. It should have felt sad, but it just felt final. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy, not because my marriage was over, but because the pretending was done. I knew who I was now, what I was capable of, and what I wouldn't tolerate. Emily had taught me that love without respect was worthless, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is show them the consequences of their choices. Brandon had taught me that evil often wears a friendly face, and that sometimes good people have to do hard things to protect themselves and others. Most importantly, I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, more capable of surviving betrayal and starting over than I'd ever imagined. The sun disappeared behind the trees, leaving the sky dark and full of stars. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably still trying to figure out what went wrong, still blaming me for destroying her fantasy. Somewhere else, Brandon was probably looking for his next victim, his next opportunity to destroy someone else's life for his own benefit. But I was here, in my own space, finally at peace with the truth. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was honest, and that was more than I'd had in a long time. I finished my beer and went inside, ready to start the next chapter of my story. This time, I'd write it myself,